Hi, good morning. So recently we were interviewing some people for a new graduate surveyor job, and between interviews having a cup of tea with our HR lady, and she said, I didn't know quite all what you do, and was talking then about the spray foam. So she said, why don't you do a video on it, because you've got a lot of experience. So okay, we will do. Here we are now. So spray foam is becoming more popular. You may have seen the Facebook ad for it, and if you Google it today, your Facebook will be full of spray foam adverts for the next week or so. As it becomes more popular, the issues with it are also becoming more popular. So over the past 8 months or so, as a company, we've looked at around 220 spray foam installations for a lender. Nothing to do with the value of the property, but purely the spray foam and is it suitable for that roof space. So I thought I would produce a video based on our knowledge, our experience, and what we've come to learn at looking at these spray foam installations. There are a couple of protocols now by the RRCS and the Property Care Association, something like that. So yeah, here we go. I'm going to split this into 5 main areas, these being thermal, fire, condensation, mortgages and cost. Just so I'm not bouncing about too much, because I do have a habit of doing that and then forgetting what I was saying before. So we'll start with thermal. Thermal is probably the primary subject as to why people have spray foam insulation popped into properties. You have it installed because it provides a better thermal lid to the property, it reduces fuel bills, it makes fuel savings and that kind of thing. So I'm going to take a little bit of a closer look at this. Under the building spray foam is quite often being sold as complies with the building regulations. There's no current requirement in the UK to increase anything in your existing property to comply with current building regulations. So it doesn't matter if you don't have any insulation in the roof, there's no legal requirement on you to upgrade your roof to anything, unless you're doing works to the property, and then we consider it as called renovation of a thermal element. But for new builds, approved document L states that the roof must have a U value of 0.16. Now, the U value is an expression as to how much heat gets lost through a particular material or through an element of construction like a roof, a wall or a floor. And the lower the value, the better the U value and the more heat that retains. In 1995, the U value was 0.25. And now in 2023, so nearly 30 years on, it's 0.16. So it's taken all that time to almost come down by half. So to achieve 0.16 of a U value, using Celotex, Kingspan or a similar polyisocyanated board, you would need 130 millimeters as a continuous board, say on a flat roof. It needs to be thicker where you've got rafters or ceiling joists or flat roof joists, that break up the insulation. If you're using mineral quilt, you're going to need around 300 to 330 millimeters, depending on the type you use. Now, I've done a bit of research on this, and there is a spray foam company that sound a little bit like copper, but they're not, that say on their website that to achieve 0.16 U value requires 175 millimeters of insulation and 32.5 millimeter PIR polyisocyanurate board. Now, to me, that seems quite thick, but it's their own maths, it's their own workings out that have told us that, so we'll stick with it. So when we first look at, let's just look at these little sketches. So in a house, heat is going to rise up through the rooms towards the roof, and we'd normally have our insulation barrier here to stop that insulation as much as possible going into the roof space. And to stop more heat loss into roof space, you can make that thicker. Spray foam is popped up here where our dashed lines are up between the rafters. So we'll come back to that in a minute. And on the other side, if we were to do a section down through, so you've got your rafters here, either trusses or rafters, your felt, which should have a sack between it, should never be pulled tight, and then your tile battens. The spray foam does that kind of profile between the rafters. So where you've got the sack there, that's what we'll refer to as the 40 millimeters or so in a minute. So we can also see that in this first photo as to this is what spray foam looks like, typically once it's been installed into a property. But as I just mentioned, with the sag in the felt, the thickness is in the center. We found it to be rarely more than 40 millimeters or so. So really quite substantially lower than the 175 millimeters that it would need to get close to complying with current building regulations. The second main thermal issue with spray foam insulation between the rafters is it requires a loft space to be heated before it can take effect. Looking back at this, if this layer of insulation here is effective, the spray foam is doing nothing whatsoever thermally. If there isn't any insulation here, and some of the spray foam contractors have taken that out, we're then heating this whole void before the spray foam can actually become effective. So if we look at the maths around this, picture for yourself a standard run-of-the-mill Victorian terrace house. 5 metres wide, 8 metres deep, 2.4 metre ceiling heights and a 45-degree pitch roof. That will have a volume of around 200 cubic metres. The roof space will have a volume of around 80 cubic metres. So if the spray foams become effective, you're heating an additional 40% of the volume of the dwelling before that has the ability to provide any thermal resistance to the heat trying to pass through it. Now if we then look at a detached bungalow, again say 8 metres front to back, 12 metres side to side, similar ceiling heights and roof pitch, the volume of that bungalow would be 230 cubic metres, but the volume of the roof space would be 192 cubic metres. That's an 83% increase in the volume you've got to heat in that property before the spray foam becomes effective, or even starts to become effective and provide a thermal barrier. So in a bungalow scenario, and we've surveyed quite a few big bungalows like that, you're looking at heating nearly double the space for the spray foam to become effective. So while it's being sold as green, environmentally friendly, to heat nearly double the volume of the property for it to get to that point is sadly not so. Okay, second point is fire. Now, quite often there's an increased fire risk is reported with spray foam. If you have a fire in your loft space, spray foam will burn. Your PIR, your polyisocyanate board will burn. Mineral quilt, rock wall, sheep's wool, any of these insulations will burn. But the one thing that insulation generally doesn't do is burn of its own accord. It requires a fuel source for it to burn. Now, I don't want to scare anyone, but your loft is more than likely going to be constructed with wooden rafters, wooden struts, collars, ties, a sarking felt that is probably felt, bitumen, that kind of product, and then battens over that. That is all going to burn. And if you have a fire, it's that will burn, and your foam, your spray foam, your insulation, your PIR is all just additional fuel for that fire. So the actual fire risk in itself like that is not significantly increased. Where the main fire increase comes from is electrics. Now the current wiring regulations take into account heat produced from cables and additional heat produced from cables when it's surrounded with insulation. And if you're doing a new build, a loft conversion or whatever, and you're running cables between ceiling joists or floor joists, and then you're going to be insulating those, the cables will generally be made bigger to allow for that additional heat that's going to be produced. Spray foam companies don't care about that. They'll just spray over the whole lot. And we've seen plug sockets, switches, light fittings, all sorts just completely sprayed over. So there is a small increase in potential fire risks for that in that respect. Okay, next item, condensation. And this is possibly one of the more interesting subjects for those of building surveyors among us that like things like dew points and moisture vapour and stuff like that. So we're going to consider a fairly run-of-the-mill modern roof space with spray foam. It doesn't need to be modern. A run-of-the-mill roof space with spray foam between the rafters, something like this that we can see in this photo here. This is a small truss rafter roof, quite a shallow pitch. We can see the rafters and we can see that everything between it is being filled with spray foam. Also going to clarify at this point that the dew point is every house will have a dew point in it, and it will vary throughout the house throughout the times of year. The dew point is the temperature at which the moisture vapour in the air becomes moisture droplets. So here in our office, the relative humidity is 64% and rising slightly, so I'll just turn this on. Temperature is 18.6 and our dew point is 13.5. So what that means is if there's a surface temperature that drops below 13.5, then the moisture vapour in the air is going to turn to moisture droplets. And the moisture vapour in the air at the moment is 8.4 grams per kilogram. a cubic metre of air is about 1.22 kilograms or thereabouts. So that is, if we divided 8.4 by 1.22, we'd know how much in terms of grams of moisture there was per cubic metre of air rather than just per kilogram of air. So where temperatures are at or below the dew point, condensation can occur. And the easiest way to think of this is maybe a single glazed window on a cold winter's day where you've got water droplets on the inside. Or in the summer it can happen. If you think of you sitting outside and having a barbecue and you've got a pint of beer, condensation will occur on the outside of that glass because the heat in the heat of the air is much warmer than the liquid inside the glass, so the dew point is lower, so it condensates on the glass that way around. And this can just as easily happen on the underside of the felt in a roof space. If we look at this photo here, photo 3, we can see that the outside temperature in this property was about 10 degrees. The temperature of the underside of the felt is 12.4 degrees and the dew point is 11.1 degrees. So in this scenario, we're only 1.3 degrees away from actual condensation occurring on the underside of the felt. The trouble is when this occurs, it's going to happen potentially out of view. So it's what we call interstitial condensation. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Most of these roofs, like I say, a roof with this without spray foam is called a cold roof. So the cold roof is where the whole of the roof structure is cold and we ventilate across the roof to take away any moisture, any condensation, any warm moisture laden air, that kind of thing. So it helps to reduce chances of condensation occurring. I'll probably come back to that in a minute actually. So roofs need ventilation, cold roofs need ventilation, and the dew point will vary throughout the day and certainly throughout the year. What we've also found in some loft spaces in this photo is the spray foam companies have removed the mineral quilt from between the floor joists, or the ceiling joist should I say. So this means even more heat will go up into the roof space. Yes, it's going to mean the spray foam's active earlier because you've got more heat coming up to it quicker, but think back to those volumes, 40%, 83% additional volume to be heated before that spray foam becomes effective. That's quite some difference. We've also got this photo here. Now, this is quite incredible because the idea of spray foam is to improve obviously the thermal capacities of the roof, but we can just about see the little red dot at the top of that, and that is recording the temperatures to the top of it. So we can see in this photo that the infrared thermal dot is on the underside of the insulation, and there's only a 0.8 temperature degree difference between the 12.3 degrees air temperature and the 11.5 degrees dew point. So even on the underside of the insulation, we're very close to condensation being an actual issue. Some suppliers of spray foam say that their products are breathable. One particular supplier on their website says that their spray foam is breathable, and then 2 lines down it says that it forms an airtight space in a loft. So it can't be both, it can't be airtight and breathable. So it just kind of demonstrates how pickled this whole industry is and how many lies are being told to try and get people to believe what they want them to believe to put this stuff in their roof spaces. There's a difference between ventilation and breathability. I'm not going to go into a massive amount about that today, but cold roofs need ventilation. BS 5250 states that in instances where a breathable underlay is to be used, then you need an air and vapour control layer at ceiling level, which would be this level here, and that's to stop warm air and moisture vapour migrating into the roof space, which in turn reduces chances of condensation occurring. Any such ACVLs are never installed retrospectively on the underside of someone's ceiling, or take the ceilings down to pop that in when they're doing spray foam. So again, it's another issue. In a traditionally ventilated roof space, where we've got ventilation here, providing a cross flow of ventilation, we can see in this photo that all too often it just gets blocked up with the spray foam, so it kills any chance of ventilation occurring. So when the spray foam's installed, the dew point remains the same, or the same as it would be with or without the foam, that doesn't matter. But generally it's going to happen above the insulation, so the dew point is going to be below the sulking felt and above the insulation. And the trouble with this is that any issues are occurring are out of view. Now, if we look at this photo, we can see that the moisture content of this timber is 33.3%. Now, any softwood timber that's above 20% moisture content for a prolonged period of time will rot. And you'll get advocates of spray foam saying, oh, I've had it 20 years, I've never had any issues. With respect, you're not going to see those issues because any damp and any rot and any decay is occurring out of view. All you're going to see is clean joists with the spray foam. You're not going to see the rot on the top of all those rafters. And this is why we're now starting to see more and more properties having to have their whole roof coverings and sometimes roof structures replaced, because the rot is happening from above due to the condensation that's occurring up there. Okay, next big issue is mortgages. It's a big issue for homeowners, particularly those wanting to sell. And now most lenders will have their policies on lending on properties with spray foam. And I'm not a valuer, but I'm imagining this is based on the loan to value ratio. So if you've got a 90-95% loan to value ratio on a property you're buying, the lender's going to send a valuer out, they're going to have a look, they're going to see the spray foam in the loft, they're going to report that back, and they may say we're not going to lend on this because of it. If you're fortunate enough to be in a position where you've got maybe a 50 or 60% loan to value, then the risk to the bank is much, much less. They might not send a valuer out. They might just use an automated valuation model just to determine the value of the property. And therefore you may get a mortgage that way. Most of, in our experience, most of the spray foam customers have been elderly. Now it doesn't matter how elderly you are. You might be, 60, 70, 80, still got a good 10, 15, 20 years left in you, but you may not want to move. That might be your home for the rest of your life, so you may have no interest in moving from that property. So the mortgage issue is going to be passed on to whoever inherits your property. What is a concern is insurance, and we've come across a couple of properties where the homeowners have been refused insurance on the refused buildings insurance because they've had spray foam insulation put in the roof space. Now, the mortgage may never affect you if you've got the next 20, 25 years in that house, and then you'll be carried out in a cardboard box, and your kids are going to inherit it. That's for you. That's up to you. That's fine. It's never going to affect you. But if you can't get buildings insurance when it renews in 8 months' time, that now becomes a problem. And where one insurer leads, the others generally follow. So it may be becoming a bigger issue over the next few years as more and more insurers say we're not going to lend on properties with spray foam in the roof. Okay, so final element is costs. Just going to run through some general costs. Again, this is all based from our experience on the properties we've inspected. Spray foam is quite often sold as this super duper, really modern material, does this, does that, it's all sorts, got government money back if you have it. A lot of that is rubbish, unfortunately, and again, it's just sales to get people to sign up. So if we consider like a 90s new build, Harry Potter type, 3-4 bed detached house, we would expect a spray foam insulation in there to cost around £6,000 to £7,000. Mineral quilt down here at the proper location, maybe £1,200 to £1,600. So the spray foam in that instance will be 4 to 5 times the price. Now go back 100 years and let's think of our Victorian mid-terrace house. Spray foam in there will probably be around the £5,000 to £6,000 mark. But mineral quilt around £1,000 to £1,400. And for these, we're kind of roughly looking at you've got 100 mil, we're just going to add 200 mil on top of it. So it's a roll of insulation, thickness wise. So again, for the terrace house, we're looking at around 5 times the price of the spray foam. And then we got the sales pitch, the £1,500 government cash back. All that means is they want £6,000 for doing the install. They quote you 7.5, knock 1,500 quid off, and they're back to where they started. So it's there's a lot of fraud going on in this industry at the moment. I'm not sure how many legitimate installers there are, but I think as we've come to, the fact is not needed. Does that mean there's actually any legitimate installers around? So on top of these price differences, there are a few other points to consider. First is fraud is a major issue. I would say 90 to 95% of the customers we've inspected their loft spaces have been elderly, and they've been pressure sold this stuff. So it's really not good. We've also unfortunately come across half dozen cases or so where they've had the spray foam done. the companies ceased trading. A year or 2 years later, very similar looking people have come back again, said it's all been done wrong, it needs to come out and be redone. £15,000, £17,000, and they've done it in a day, and all they've done is just sprayed another insulation over the top of it, so they've magnified the issue even more. Quite often these same people are, because they're vulnerable, they've been told that their solar panel batteries aren't working, you need a new one. And we've had a couple of clients where they've paid around £28,000 out on the basis of someone turning up at the door and pressure selling them these additional things. So the people that are up to this are absolute pure scum, and I know that trading standards in various places are kind of onto them, which is a really good thing. So as I said at the beginning and a couple of places through, this is my experience, our company's experience, based on the couple hundred properties that we've inspected. But the general facts are, in summary, is that spray foam costs, to have this stuff put up here, costs around 4 to 5 times the price of having proper, where you need it, mineral quilt put in lower down in the roof above your ceiling joists. We know that there's issues with mortgage companies, and there's going to probably be issues with insurers too, because a couple of them have started querying this already. The spray foam obviously requires your loft to be heated before it takes any effect whatsoever. So as we said earlier, terrace house, 40% additional, a bungalow with a big roof, 83% additional volume to be heated is a lot of additional input to be put in before the spray foam takes effect. And then we've got all our condensation issues, the lack of ventilation, the dew points occurring up here, which on this sketch, the dew point will be occurring on here, on the warm side, cold side of the insulation and under the sarking felt. So what that's going to result is rot across the top of the rafters here. So yeah, if you're happy to pay 4 or 5 times the price, you're happy to potentially have rot issues, you're happy to have a property that's unmortgageable, and you're happy to heat all that additional space, then maybe the spray foam is the way to go. But for everyone else, I wouldn't go anywhere near it. And if you have had it installed, seriously think about having it taken out. If you've got any questions, please leave them below. Thank you so much for getting this far in the video. And if you'd like to subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.